My name is Abby Miller Gudich, and I'm the Director of Admissions here at San Francisco Girls School. Thanks for taking the time to view our Head of School coffee that happened this past month. In this video, you will see our Director of Academics, Yvonne Faisal, our Head of School, Dr. Blankenship, and myself answering questions from prospective families and sharing a little bit about what we do here at San Francisco Girls School. I hope you enjoy it. And please know that you're welcome to reach out to us with any questions throughout the admissions process. Enjoy.
I have been now in San Francisco. I came in July of 2020 to start the school. I spent 10 years prior to that at the Baldwin School. It's a pre-K to 12 school just outside of Philadelphia. Before that, I was at Bryn Mawr College, another all-women's institution right across the street from the Baldwin School. So that puts me at almost 20 years in all-girls education. So I did not have that experience as a student, but fell into it and absolutely have loved it. I taught computer science at Baldwin, but I actually got my bachelor's in creative writing. So I'm a weird mix of humanities and techie personality. I still love to read and still love writing, but I also love to write computer programs and do fun things with robots. And so I'm actually going to be teaching a course in the second term, an intro to computer science course that's more about social media, looking at computer science from that perspective as an introduction, and then I'll do an advanced course in the third term, which is really fun to get to be back in the classroom again. It's one of the things you miss as an administrator, that you get to see sort of the big picture of the school, but then you miss all that close interaction with the students. Something that I have absolutely loved over the last 6 weeks. I took all the girls for ice cream yesterday as part of Founding Day. Just super fun to be able to hang out with students again and really get to know this first class, and something that regardless of what I wanted to do when I wanted to be a head, that was something I wanted to cultivate, was close relationships with the students, even though I was in a administrative role. And this is a perfect opportunity to do that. So I love it. So I brought a lot of that like interdisciplinary mindset to San Francisco Girls School. You'll see that in a lot of our curriculum, that we're very intentionally building in a lot of these interdisciplinary courses and interdisciplinary mindset. I think seeing things from different perspectives and letting disciplines inform each other is really powerful and can really lead to really interesting questions and solving new problems. So I'm really excited about a lot of the elements of that we're building into the program. And I also really love the hands-on components that we have, lots of opportunities for our students to really apply what they've learned in context. And I think that's really important. I am looking forward to hearing what your questions are, whether they're about academics, and Yvonne can answer a lot of those, or if you want to, ask about how things are going so far and what we're looking forward to and what we have planned for the year. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question. And my experience as a student was not in an all-girls environment. But my daughter went through my school, which was obviously all girls. So I've seen it firsthand as a parent, in addition to seeing it as an educator. There are a couple of key components that I think are really important about an all-girls education, and I think we have. Isn't Ava's at an all-girls school? Is that correct? Yep. So they can probably speak to it too. All-girls schools really do have build a lot of confidence in the students. They get this idea that being around girls all the time, they get to lead everything. They there's never a question that they can do something. They are really encouraged to take risks and to take all different kinds of subjects. No one's saying, oh, you can't do math, or you can't do engineering, or you can't do computer science because that's the thing for boys, or you can't I don't know, do a particular kind of club, because that's not, something that girls do. So that's one way in which, girls build a lot of confidence, is that they're able to take those risks and try new things, and they're really encouraged to do that. And there's just more of that happens in an all girls environment. A lot of the experience too is, and we're building this in really intentionally, is providing role models for students. It's something that the girls' schools that I've had experience in have done a lot of, making sure that the girls see women at different stages in their careers, understand how you get from point A to point B, know what that career path looks like and how they face the obstacles along the way. Seeing that sort of real world experience is really important and empowering for girls to be able to see, oh, I want to be that, and I think I could get there because she started where I did, and that's, perfectly fine. So that's really an important component. Abby actually has a lot of experience in all girls schools. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Abby.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I'm actually a graduate of Convent of the Sacred Heart here in San Francisco. I went there for middle and high school. And I was a student that was a little more on the quiet side. I kind of wasn't really seen in a co-ed environment. And I also really didn't advocate for myself. And when I went into an all-girls school, I was just so impressed with how girls became the leaders in their groups, and that they were leading in athletics, they were leading in the student government fields, and they were like really coming together as a community. And as a student, that was really exciting to me, and that I could maybe go into those types of roles when I didn't really see that for myself. And also that I had just really wonderful relationships with my teachers who were there for the intention of educating young women, and their pedagogies really, and just personalities really spoke to everything that we needed in high school. And that was just a really wonderful experience, and one that transformed me. And I didn't actually think that it would be the path that I would go to for my high school experience. But once I was in the environment and, had a sense, I realized like, wow, this is actually really cool. So I always encourage students that are considering it to really just try and visit and get a sense of what it might feel like.
I think the key, so we did a lot of work before school started. I talked a lot about my experience and some of the research around, what girls can sometimes experience, especially in high school. The biggest thing being a sort of drop off in confidence in their skills. And so making sure that faculty are really aware of that it's not just teaching, academic skills, of being aware when they're sort of struggling because they're just not feeling like they're good at something. And so helping them overcome that barrier. I was just, in fact, having a conversation with our math teacher about that very thing, and that she said, the biggest thing that I'm working on with the girls is helping them understand that they are good at this and not to give up and to sort of keep going. And I think that's something that unfortunately for girls at that age, they often do sort of give up. And if you're not a teacher who's aware that that's something that's common, you might just sort of say, well, they've decided they just don't like it or they're not good at it, and you won't see it as a lack of confidence and something that you can actually help with and help them overcome and get and feel stronger about. So and just the other piece of that too is encouraging girls to take risks. I think that's something, it builds confidence, and it's something that unfortunately our culture sometimes, tells girls not to do the risky thing. And so, helping them take those steps to try something new, to try, doing a big presentation in front of a bunch of people they've never done that before, and supporting them in that process. Yvonne, I don't know if you want to add anything as you're working with the faculty on a lot of this.
Yes, I would add a few different things. One is across the board in education, we find over and over again, whenever we have students with learning differences or students with different styles or different environments, whatever that looks like, and teachers make accommodations to help that student out. So it may be having closed caption, it may be having an option to listen to an audiobook instead of only just reading. So, you know, you have these modifications, and usually those are presented as choices. Like, if this would help you, why don't you try it this way? And overwhelmingly in the education field, what we find is whenever we try a technique to help one set of sort of othered students, it helps everybody. Even those that would be sort of considered mainstream learners actually benefit from this. And so particularly for girls' education, leaning in on things like agency and really speaking up and forming those opinions, or like Laura mentioned, taking a risk, throwing something out there. What we find is that it's really good for girls. In fact, much of the pedagogy that is good for girls is good for all learners. And so our teachers have been practicing and stretching themselves in co-ed environments, but it translates over to the girls. And so the biggest is more on the relationship side and really forming and thinking about being role models and mentors. One piece that we were really intentional about when we hired was that we want to really provide role models of women who are more than just one thing, right? Like, I am not just a mom, or I am not just a math teacher, or I'm not just a soccer coach, right? But that you can actually be all of these things at the same time. And so most all of our teachers are teaching in more than one discipline. So this idea of having an interdisciplinary skill set, and this idea of really modeling that there's more to me than just this one dimension is really key, and something that our faculty are really enjoying, that they get to bring their real, authentic, full selves and get to explore different pieces of that every day.
We talk about this all the time, actually. So we, you know, there's a lot of the things that you'll hear that many schools these days have in common, but I think creative problem solving is probably near the top of our list. It's part of why we have the interdisciplinary components that we do, and, you know, some of the arts components and design components that bring that creativity to a kind of systemic thinking that you get from the STEM fields. You know, we want girls with, you know, cultural competency and to be able to navigate different cultures at in their communities and at work. We've long been in a global society, and the pandemic has really brought that home to us, I think. I think we want students who are adaptable and who can change as things change in the world. And so teaching them, you know, making sure that they have that skill of knowing how to learn and change their skill set as needed. So we've been really intentional about making that visible when they are learning, of like, here's how you might take this to the next step. So we're really building that in. So those are the three things that come, you know, that are kind of at the top of the list. And Yvonne, I don't know if you want to add another couple to that.
I would. In some ways, these are maybe a little bit of a subset of creative problem solving. But I would definitely say an iterative mindset, that you don't get things right on the first time. And even if you get something right, it can often be improved on or taken to the next level or expanded to include more people or solve more problems. So this idea of this iterative mindset, and a portion of that is also the idea of really being good at giving and receiving feedback. This is actually a really hard skill, and I think a lot of, even as adults, we have to work at that, I think. And so we do it as part of a collaborative process. And so this idea of kind of getting and giving feedback, and we work it into all sorts of things. So I did a presentation a few days ago where I brought some people in to speak. The next day we sat with all the students and I said, okay, so if I'm going to bring in another speaker next week or next month, what portions went well, what portions didn't go well, what would you want me to change? But you can't just say things like, it was too long. That's a statement, but then what's actionable for me? What would I cut? What would I do differently? And so by even giving opportunities for us as adults to receive feedback from them. We're really emphasizing that your voice matters. You are the client or the customer, and how do you give me feedback, and just modeling that. And so I think that iterative mindset and this idea of being able to give and receive feedback those are two really key pieces that I feel like if they graduate from here in 4 years and they've got that in a way that they're still comfortable and confident, not having to hide parts of themselves, that's really key.
Right. Yeah, I would say on the pro side, we all know the girls really well. We know their strengths. We know a lot about them. We know a lot about them, which means that we can support them in all kinds of ways so that no one falls through the cracks in any way, shape, or forms. They get a lot of personalized attention, and that is a really positive thing, so that they're feeling like their voices are being heard, their individual goals and passions have room to be considered and supported. And I think that you can get lost in a bigger school, and you might have an interest, you might want to start something or do something or work on a project, but trying to get the attention of someone to move that forward might be a little more difficult in a larger environment. On the con side, of course, is, not everybody wants that particular attention necessarily. And I think we've done, being small sometimes means you don't have as many resources on the table, but we've done, I think, a really good job of being able to provide a lot of things despite being small. We've gotten really creative with partnerships that we've established. We have a tremendous network of people that we've been able to tap into to come in and speak and offer lots of opportunities for our students. And so we've just gotten creative. If a student comes to us, and we even started this during the admissions process last year, we started to hear things like, for example, we were thinking of just offering one language, and we started to hear from people that, oh, well, I'm really interested in, sign language, or I'm interested in this. And so we started talking about, how do we offer multiple languages even though we're a small school? And so we, for now, are doing several of our languages online, and as those become more popular and we get bigger, we'll be able to bring more of those face to face. So we just have gotten really creative about what we're doing to provide as expansive a program as we can, given our size. And it feels pretty good. I think the girls feel like they have a lot of choices, even in the 9th grade, which, even larger schools don't always offer options for 9th graders to take electives. So I don't know if Abby, you or Yvonne want to add anything to the pros and cons of a small size.
I would say with one hat on, a con might be not joining really well-established competitive sports teams, or like a large choir, or some of those things that you would associate with sort of a really well-established school. The flip side of that is what we have done, again, leaning into that adaptability and flexibility piece, right? If a student's on a CY team for soccer, or playing, competitive volleyball, or in a dance troupe, what we care about is that they're using their bodies and being athletic and like leaning into that. And we would count that in replacement for, the programs that we have here. And instead, we're doing things, since our volleyball team this year is really small and not overly competitive, plus it's COVID, but we've sort of pivoted. So we're not focusing as much on court volleyball, we're doing beach volleyball, right? So like they spend some time in the gym and doing court stuff, but then we're taking them over to Ocean Beach and we're practicing beach volleyball, which is appropriate for a smaller size team. And so as we continue to lean into these, so if there's a student who wants a specific, really classic, I want to be on Model United Nations, and I want to be like on the basketball team, and I want to do the tailgating parties. That's not who we are. But there's lots of ways for you to be you in a way that a small school can really support and celebrate.
Yeah, I would also say too, if you're excited about trying sports or trying new things, like a number of the girls on our volleyball team, which we fielded, which is awesome, have not had a chance to really play team sport before, or like they haven't, they've just kind of veered away from it just because they've had other interests and commitments. And it's one of those things that because their friends are interested and involved, like they're able to join and play and participate. And I think it just kind of lessens a lot of the pressures that sometimes exist of like making a varsity team or making a junior varsity team, because if you just have an interest or want to try something, you may not get those opportunities right away. So I also just really appreciate the fact that our students have such a voice in this community, and these first few classes, like we anticipate being a school of about like 150 in the next 4 years. So small but mighty. But these first few classes really have the ability to really frame the fabric of the school and have a real voice. And I imagine all of our classes will have that in the future, which is very unique in a high school experience.
I'll jump in on this, Jeremy, and be super transparent. My high school graduating class size was 4. So I represented 25% of the class, right? And I had a really non-traditional high school experience, which did inform, I think, that there were a lot of new and novel things in college that I was like navigating for the first time at the college level as compared to the first time at the high school level. One of the things that I think is really, from a social emotional perspective and linked with our curriculum, we are essentially a startup in a lot of ways. We have this entrepreneurial mindset that we are figuring things out, and there are a lot of questions that come up, or the girls want to try something, and they're getting firsthand this experience of like, I'm not sure we're figuring this out, or we're going to try this, but we may back ourselves out. And so I think that actually is really a beautiful model for SEL, right? For social emotional learning, this idea that, oh, this was my vision, this is what I'm trying. Okay, that didn't work, or I don't have the resources. Like, I can't actually do that right now. What could I do different that still gets me where I want to go? Or how do I what does this feel like? And I think being able to actually unpack that with the context of essentially entrepreneurialism and startup mindsets, but continue those conversations for all of our development and our more personal things is really powerful, because they see that it's not just a separated conversation. The tools that you learn here are actually applicable over here. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, I'll also say that just so far, the class has really gelled together. It's adorable, honestly. And I'm sure that conflicts will arise over time and that we will help them negotiate that. One of the things that we're putting in place, one of the things that we have thought about and noticed is that, it's a 9th grade class. There's no juniors, seniors. There's obviously the faculty that serve as role models, but no sort of near peer people. So we're actually engaging with some recent college graduates and college students to sort of serve that role. And Yvonne is working with one of our supporters, advisors on bringing that to the school so that we have opportunities for that mentorship that's not about, the academics, but about like, how do I navigate, friendships? How do I think about what I want to be when I grow up, and how do I find an internship, and how did you do that? And just a little conversation of having another interested young adult to have those conversations with, that's not going to grade your paper next week or whatever. So we felt like very quickly, we just kind of thought it would be really important to bring some of those components into the school as we're building. Yes, that's a great question. So we obviously are funded a lot by donations. We have our founding board of trustees primarily has been the source of the initial funding, as well as a lot of their network. And we will continue, as most independent schools do, to raise money from that network to support primarily, the financial support for our students, so that regardless of your ability to pay, we can support your attending the school. Obviously, building out some of our programs and our facilities, we'll be working on funding for that. We've been very successful in being able to raise the money that we've needed to get the school off the ground and to keep it in a sustainable place. We've had some very generous people in our community, which has been lovely. Yeah, that's a really good question. We are modeling most independent schools that are around 70 to 80% of their revenue is covered by tuition, and the other 20% or so is covered by donations, and that is our target as well. That we will have about 20 to 30% of our revenue is expected to come from fundraising. Yeah, the only capital needs that we are considering, and we're still considering the timing of this, whether we initiate that this summer or we wait one summer. We have some other options. So we want to build out our science lab spaces. And we already have like the architectural work done for that. And we're just trying to figure out, as we're living in the building, like exactly where that space is going to be, and then readjust those plans based on that. So that's our only big capital project that we have in mind right now.
I would expand just a little bit. We are leasing our building, but we have a fairly long lease term. So we're not in a position of having to worry about raising money for a building in the next, 3 to 5 years, which is a great position to be, and one of those things that many startups have to navigate. So we're feeling really fortunate about having a great home.
I would say that, one of the things I was just saying the other day, that our current class is a little bit of everything. But I would say that they all have, a curiosity for learning, a little bit of independence in that learning. So, obviously that grows and develops over time. So it's not like you have to start off being a perfectly independent learner, but I've certainly seen in our applicant pool last year, and who we ended up with, is that at least desire for figuring out what I want to do and what I want to learn, and striking off on my own or with a couple of partners to figure something out has been really important. It's a little bit of that entrepreneurial mindset, I think, of this desire to really have a say and shape some of the program. And I think that pretty much everybody in our class, as different as they are personality wise and where they come from and all of that, they all have a little element of that kind of, I want to make my mark on something, and I want to try something out and do something, sort of a little streak of independence in there. Abby and Yvonne, I'm sure you have things that you are looking for as well.
I would say one of the other pieces that sort of comes up for us is this idea of inclusion, belonging, right? So cultivating belonging is really important to us. And the way that we really frame that is, we want you to be you in a way that lets me be me, or encourages me to be me. And so I think Laura mentioned curiosity, but I would just say this like nature of acceptance, and really like, I want to be me, and I really want to let you be you, and that's cool. We can be really different. And so I think that mindset of being unique and appreciating that about each other is really important. So we have just one period, their English class, Origin Stories, where we keep everybody together for the very first term. And in part, that's sort of has some elements of a homeroom experience and one teacher that's seeing how they're all interacting. But for the rest of all of the periods, they mix and match. So, you know, there's 2 different biology classes. You might be in this section or this section. There's 2 advisory groups. And so we were really intentional about keeping that sort of mixed so that they are not with the same group of people all the time, every day, doing the same thing. They're really unique and we want to be able to give them that. We also felt like an element of agency, and we use that term, especially with the girls, we define it as voice and choice, right? So agency means that I get to put my voice in on things, and it also means that I have choices for myself. And so they have choices of their electives, even in the English core curriculum. So in subsequent terms, they can take English 9. It's Fleet Week, so I don't know if you guys are hearing this too, but
oh yeah.
it's a little impressive. So in English 9, they'll have a choice between a dystopian type class where they're studying sort of sci-fi and futuristic type things, or a literary heroines class, right? Like, so what are some of these heroes that, you know, in there, with the idea being that they're learning the same skills, but when I get to have choice on what type of literature I might like, it's more engaging. And so the same thing, you know, choices of electives, everything from kickboxing to improv to digital photography to a biological zombies class where they're looking at parasites and various other things. So there's a lot of elective choice and they get to sort of spread out in that way. Throughout the day, they'll have either 2 to 3 classes, which is a really different model than what many high schools do. So they're in those classes for 90 minutes at a time and really kind of get a chance to go deep. And in between, there's also buffered studio time, which is a chance for collaboration. So that's where learning kind of continues. So I might be meeting with a partner to work on a biology lab write-up. I might be checking in with my English teacher to get some feedback on this. You know, my thesis statement just doesn't feel like it's working. Can you give me some input? Or if they know that there's something that they have due tomorrow that they really need to focus on. So this is one of those ways where we're really building up their skills of how do I use my time. High school is often incredibly structured, and yet the real world is not. And there is a need for structure, but we're really wanting to scaffold this so that they can make choices about how they're using their time wisely. There's time in a week for advisory where they're meeting with that same group of girls that they'll be with for their whole 4 years. There's time in the week for clubs. There's time in the week for experiential learning. So 1 day a week is non-traditional learning. We're outside of the classroom and doing a variety of things. So there's really sort of a mix of experiences as they go back and forth. Whole community together, individual, collaboration, class, back and forth. I'll also throw out classes start at 9:10 and then we're done at 3:25 each day. So there is a lot of research around the health of a later start at the high school level. And so that's our scaffolding too. The girls would tell me I'm not being truthful or honest if I don't say that the average day involves a lot of stairs. So we're in an old San Francisco building, 4 stories, right? So classes are often on the 4th floor, but food is on the 1st floor. And so they are up and down the stairs a lot. So they would tell you that's part of their experience. So we don't have honors at the 9th grade level, but we will at later levels. And then we also will have advanced topics, which is what a number of high schools have been moving away from the APs and towards advanced topic classes. So there is a lot of idea of challenge. For things like world language and math, we want them to be at the appropriate level. And it's one of those things that sort of depends on where you're at. We, however, don't want to just give a placement test somewhere in May that's just a random sort of assessment. And so in math, all of our students start with a habits of mind class, which is a really multi-layered class. So whether you had geometry or you haven't had geometry, we're really looking at it from a different perspective on how do you communicate math, how do you read other people's math, how do you interpret it? So some of those softer skills while also filling in some of the holes of what you may or may not have experienced in the past. And then we put you, there's a choice and a whole process of sort of what feels like the right level to keep you really challenged. We're doing a lot of feedback too with the students, but being challenged by regular curriculum is not a problem that we're having. There are a lot of opportunities to stretch yourself and to move forward.
We tell the girls to dress comfortably and safely. So if you're in a lab, there are certain things that you're not going to want to, you're going to want to have closed-toed shoes and some things like that. So we're pretty basic about our dress code. And in terms of the trajectory as they get to be older and whether we want them to be part of labs, absolutely. We already have some tentative agreements with university and industry labs. We're just not there yet to get all the pieces in place because the girls aren't ready for that yet, but they will be very soon. And so we'll have most of that probably worked out starting at the beginning of next year. We'll have a lot more of those details of what that looks like, what the timing looks like, and what our different placements will be. But I've been in lots of conversations of, so I've got a nice running list right now of like, yes, we'd love to take your kids when they're juniors or seniors. And so we're just keeping that list and that communication going. It is kind of semi-open, I would say. We are still kind of navigating how we don't have a lot of time for lunch, for example, on some days. So there's just not it's more time factor than anything, but the girls have gone off campus several times for lunch. Clement Street's right there, and they've all discovered the great boba shop over there. So that's where they usually go. So a lot of Wednesdays, which are our experiential learning days, they're able to go off campus. We've let them roam around, obviously, after school, but it's so semi-open.
I will also just add to that, especially on experiential days, one of kind of the core tenets, we really want this educational experience to not feel like they're in a bubble, which can happen in an independent school world for a variety of really good reasons. But we want to sort of be able to use San Francisco as an amazing campus. We're part of a really great city. We are across the street from a library, a city library, so we don't need to recreate a library in our own rights. We are going across the street, and we've already had a couple visits there to go do research, to meet the librarians, to grab books, to kind of come back and forth. We have taken the bus and gone downtown to meet with the San Francisco Historical Society and doing walking tours and looking at, what is the history of San Francisco and how to take some of those pieces, and then are working with them. One of our longer term projects that we're doing this year is to develop the girls will develop a walking tour of this inner Richmond district, which again is interdisciplinary. It pulls like interviewing people. It involves some history and pulling up, photos of what the street looked like now, photos of what it looks like, what it looked like in the 1940s, what's changed, what hasn't changed, how do you write as if you're going on a walking tour as compared to like your 5-paragraph essay. So writing for context, not just writing for writing's sake. And many of those other pieces. And we are heading to the MoMA next week. Again, we'll take the bus. So in some ways, like the open campus is like supervised open in a lot of ways, that we're going in different parts of the city. And then for lunch, obviously, getting to go off campus, or like Laura said, she took them out for ice cream yesterday. So that was walking down a couple blocks. Our kickboxing class is offered through a kickboxing studio that's just a block away. And so we walk over to kickboxing and take it at that studio. And so really kind of forming partnerships through the city that makes sense for us, and really kind of build the city out.
I would say, I think the only other main profile is, we are able to support a number of sort of minimal learning differences, but if you're looking for a school that's providing a tremendous amount of support for a learning difference or something special along those lines, we're just not there yet. I think in 4 or 5 years, just like with sports, in 4 or 5 years, we'll have a lot more supports for a lot of different things, but that would be the only other kind of profile if you're looking for specialized support in some area of learning that we probably are not going to have a tremendous in-depth look at something like that.
I would maybe expand one other category, and I wouldn't say not a good fit. I would say it might feel uncomfortable, and that's for a student who really is really literal, who wants to be told what to do, like tell me what to do and I will do it, sort of a more compliant type learner. And I would argue that actually we would be an awesome place because we will help sort of like expand your borders, but there would probably be some discomfort there. An example that I'm thinking of, so our math teacher who's amazing, but really like that first week, she's like, when you guys are asking me, is that right? Did I get it right? Like, I'm not interested in right, and that like blew people's minds. Like, wait, I need to know if it's right or not. But she really was sort of leaning into this idea of how could I tell if it's right? Is it a true statement or a false statement, right? Like, what is this sort of like back and forth? How do I determine if something's right? Which are really awesome questions, but there's like hitting some of those levels of, you know, in the real world, if your boss already knew the right answer, they wouldn't be asking you what the answer was. We have to get past the being able to check if we're right before we keep going. And so leaning into some of those pieces where you have to sort of keep putting yourself out on the ledge. And so I think someone who really wants to be on that straight and narrow path would find it uncomfortable. And I think we would be great for that type of learner because I think we'll scaffold that and we'll really like help move that direction.
We do not have a cafeteria. We have been getting our food from the restaurants around us. So we every day place orders at a variety of different restaurants, and we're getting feedback on that from the girls. Some of them are picking places that they'd like to try. And so that's where lunch comes from.
Yeah, the students are also working on a design thinking challenge, and one of the spaces that a group is working on is a snack shack, where they actually sent out a survey for the types of snacks that to see what kind of snacks students wanted, and faculty got to do a little input too, which was fun. And so we imagine in the next couple months that'll be a big part of this campus too. So student run and, you know, pretty cool lunch options around here too.
That's not to say that we might not in the future have a more built out cafeteria or different kind of lunch service, but this is what we decided we wanted for this year and probably for next year. Very good question. We we expect students to have a laptop, but we do provide support if needed for that purchase. And then, you know, everything is covered for the most part in tuition with that exception. And then we have a ton of technology available on campus. We have access to, you know, everything from calculators to a laser cutter and 3D printers, and we've got robots and more robots coming, and electronics, and you know, so we keep building things. So it's but we're trying to provide as almost all of it, you know, sort of in-house.
And building on that just a little bit, so the tuition is all inclusive other than lunch and a laptop, and you know, financial aid is definitely available for those students that may need it, but in general we don't want that to be a barrier. It's one of the things that we're actively working to like lower barriers wherever we can. So textbooks, readings, calculators, cameras, if you're in the digital photography class, all of those things are included within your tuition. We're really looking forward to getting to see you in person and letting you see the space and flesh that out a little bit more. And I'm sure that there'll be more questions come up as you like go to that next level.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you all in person.
Yeah, thank you all so much for taking some time with us, and we look forward to showing you the building. And, you know, as Yvonne said, questions then or anytime before then or after, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're really excited to get to know you and look forward to welcoming you soon.